Hey, this is Sarah with Precision Camera in Austin, Texas. Today I am super excited to debut a follow-up camera to one of my favorite cameras that came out in 2014. This is the brand new LX100 Mark II. We're down on East 6th Street. We're gonna walk around, take some pictures, and test this new camera out. So, the first thing I'm gonna say is, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. I will say that the differences between this camera and the previous model are not huge. That being said, for 2018 compared to a 2014 model, this camera has all the contemporary updates that it needed. First and foremost, we're looking at a higher resolution sensor. This is a 17 megapixel 4/3 sensor. What's cool about this sensor is that depending on the ratio you're shooting in, you actually get different resolution. Something that is known on the LX100 is this dial right here that allows you to change your aspect ratio very quickly. You can go between 3:2, 4:3, 16:9, or 1:1. You make the most of the resolution by using the aspect ratio 4:3. It dwindles down from 17 megapixels to 12.5 if you shoot in a square. But I love that it's a camera that gives you the capability of shooting in the format you like. Another big change to this camera that I think was absolutely necessary, especially because we've seen it on so many Panasonic cameras before, is the touch screen. So now you can touch to focus, you can even put it up to your eye and move the focus point around. This still has the Venus engine, as do all the Panasonic cameras. Although it isn't specifically stated, this is the same processor that is found in the G9 and the GX9. The beautiful thing about this design, and truthfully all of the LX cameras that Panasonic has come out with, they're a photographer's camera. You get an aperture ring, shutter speed dial, you get more external manual controls. As far as the ergonomic changes to this camera, compared to the previous model, there really aren't a ton. The lens is the same. It's a 24 to 75 millimeter. It's an f1.7 to 2.8. Now, this is not a fixed aperture lens. As you zoom out, the aperture will stop down. However, 2.8 is the max that it'll stop down to until you manually stop it down beyond that. So if you're trying to shoot in low light, you're gonna have a great wide open aperture no matter what part of the zoom range you're in. The max mechanical shutter speed on this camera is 4,000th of a second. The max electronic shutter on this camera goes up to 1/16,000th of a second. Now, something that a lot of people might not realize about this camera that I think is fantastic, because a lot of great cameras have these, is it has a leaf shutter. A leaf shutter not only allows for very minimal movement when it comes to the shutter, but it also allows you to sync with a flash of pretty much any speed. As far as the controls of this camera, you still get a lot of the scene modes and things that Panasonic is known for. The 4K photo mode is implemented, and what's actually really cool about the 4K photo mode in this camera is that you can shoot it at any of the aspect ratios. So you can do 4K photo mode at a square, 1:1 or 16:9. We'll test all this out later. This also gives you post-focus mode, which is now usable, seeing that we have a touch screen. Now, something you'll notice about this camera, seeing that it doesn't have a mode dial, is that it does have a really tiny little IA button. This is the default switch to get into intelligent auto mode. If you don't want to screw around with your aperture, your shutter speed, you can just easily hop right into IA. This camera shoots in 4K at 30 frames per second and 24 frames per second, and it shoots in 1080 at 60 frames per second, 30 frames per second, and 24 frames per second. The max recording time in this camera at 4K is 15 minutes. The first thing I want to try out with this camera is the different focal lengths of the lens. You can zoom this two ways. You can either use this traditional kind of point and shoot dial, or you can use this dial right here and move your zoom that way. So one thing I noticed that's pretty cool is when you use this dial, it acts like you're using different prime lenses. It lets you only shoot at 24, 28, 35, 50, etc. When you use this style, you get the whole range. So this kind of has a traditional lens aspect to it. All right. This also goes into a digital zoom that's about 2 times the zoom range. So technically I can go to 150 millimeters. Because this camera has a wide aperture, no matter where you are in the zoom range, of 1.7 to 2.8, depending on your distance between you and your subject and the distance behind your subject, you can actually get a really nice shallow depth of field and some really pretty bokeh. So Amanda, I'm gonna have you come kind of right here. And if you'll kind of like lean towards me a little bit, there you go. Cool. Lumix cameras have a ton of color profiles like vivid or natural or monochrome. Something that is brand new to this camera are the L monochrome and the L monochrome D. The L monochrome D I think is absolutely beautiful. It looks like film. All right, so if I could have you come over here and maybe sit on like that 4th or 5th step. Yeah, that's perfect. I'm definitely noticing a huge difference between these color profiles. So it's going to be interesting when I get them onto the computer and see if they're as dramatic on the computer as they are in camera. I want to test out the video capabilities of this camera. Now, I will say that in my opinion, this is definitely not a video camera. It does do 4K and it will match Lumix color profiles to a lot of their other more video-oriented cameras like the GH5 or GH4, but it's missing a mic port and it doesn't have stabilization in the body. It might come out a little shaky, but let's go try some 4K video on that blue We're going to test out 4K photo mode now. With 4K photo mode on this camera, because we have different aspect ratios, we can actually shoot 4K photo mode in whatever aspect ratio we want. So the LX100 Mark II does not come with a flash built into the camera, but it does come with this little detachable unit right here. It's a guide number of 10, so it's not going to reach super far, and it's not bounceable, but it'll get the job done for fill flash, which I think fits a kind of street-oriented camera pretty well anyway. So let's test it out. I want to test the post-focus mode on this camera. Seeing that this has a touch screen now, it makes it really easy. So Amanda, if you could just stay right where you're at and stay super still, will you actually kind of look that way? And just like, yeah, try to be as still as you can. And what post-focus allows is us to choose what we want to focus on after the fact. So I can focus on the flower, or I can focus on Amanda, and I can pick the picture I want. So if that's the picture I want, I hit set and I save. One thing that they did update on this camera is the back screen. It's higher resolution and it's, quite frankly, a lot easier to see. They didn't update the electronic viewfinder though, which kind of bums me out because I feel that's kind of how this camera is intended to be used. It still is fantastic. It's not bad by any means. Overall, the LX100 Mark II definitely doesn't disappoint. This camera is already tried and true and proven to be an awesome system. They just updated it to kind of match more current technology. The Leica lens is absolutely fantastic and very sharp. The image quality is great. We're gonna have this camera in stock soon, so come by the store, check it out for yourself, and hit subscribe. We're gonna have a lot more reviews coming up shortly. We can't wait to share what we have in the works with you.